I regret to advise you that word has just reached us that Dr. Otto Homburger finds it impossible to leave Germany in time to give the course of 15 lectures on English illuminated manuscripts before the Gothic period, which was scheduled to be held in the library on Tuesday afternoons commencing September 28, 1937. Therefore, this course of lectures will have to be postponed either to the second academic term, February through May 1938, or later. When a definite decision is received from Otto Homburger, an announcement will be sent to you. Sincerely yours, Belle da Costa Green, Director.
It's 1937. Belle offers a lifeline to art historian Otto Homburger, an invitation to give a series of lectures at the Morgan Library that will enable him to leave Nazi Germany. 2 years earlier, he had been declared non-Aryan and fired from his job as professor at the University of Marburg because of his Jewish ancestry. Green's efforts are in vain. After months of pleading for permission to leave Germany, Homburger sends her a chilling cablegram with just 2 words in German: kommen unmöglich, impossible to come.
Olive complexion, green eye reflection, proud black lady, but maybe not in detection. Not cause neglection, we're talking early 1900s. Her moms chose to pass, kids took direction. Belle da Costa Green, it's the queen librarian. Born Marion Greener, but she went contrarian. See, her father was Harvard educated and black. In fact, the first to get that stat, so better know that.
I'm Anne-Marie Eze, a librarian at Harvard University.
And I'm Rachel Lowell Ellison, a leadership expert and executive coach.
This is Boss Like Belle, a podcast in which I seek inspiration from the life of the legendary American librarian Belle da Costa Green and dare myself and you to lead fearlessly like her.
Join us as we unpack the learnings and insights from the parallel lives of 2 Black women navigating the very white space of professional librarianship, a century apart.
Portuguese background was for Stella Mine. It also should be noted, Belle was kind of fine.
Episode 4, Impossible to Leave Germany.
What happened to Otto Homburger?
I wondered the same thing as I read through the correspondence between Homburger, Green, and Walter W.S. Cook in the archive at the Morgan Library Museum, especially when I saw that Homburger had been under investigation by the German Foreign Office that was at the time led by Alfred Rosenberg. He was the leading ideologist of the Nazi Party. He's kind of known as the mastermind of the Holocaust. So I was literally holding my breath as I read each letter in chronological order, and this cablegram with kommen unmöglich chilled me to the bone. So I just put it down and I quickly consulted the online dictionary of art historians, and I was relieved to learn that Homburger survived the war and he actually lived until 1964.
An unbelievable story. I can't imagine what it felt like to read those letters one by one. You mentioned Walter Cook. Can you tell us more about who he was and what role he played?
Sure, yeah. So Walter Cook, he was Green's co-conspirator in supporting Jewish European medieval and Renaissance refugee scholars during the Nazi era. He was the founding director of the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU, New York University. And in his role there, he leveraged his position to hire prominent German and Austrian art historians who were forced to flee persecution. And in fact, Cook is reputed to have said, "Hitler is my best friend. He shakes a tree and I collect the apples," which is rather glib, but by that he meant that Nazi Europe's loss was America's and specifically NYU's gain. And what was going on there enabled him to elevate the Institute into a premier centre for art history, research and education. And, the most famous of this foreign talent that Green and Cook helped bring to America was actually Erwin Panofsky, the art historian, whom Belle affectionately nicknamed Pan. And Green, she adored Panofsky. In fact, in one letter to a trustee of both the Morgan Library and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, she wrote,
I think Dr. Panofsky would be an excellent man for part-time advisor in the Department of Decorative Arts at the Metropolitan Museum. He is, as you know, an expert in a large part of this field, and confidentially, far beyond any of the present men in that department.
Wow. I'm curious how Belle's actions in the 30s and 40s inspired you. Can you tell us about that?
The actions of Belle, Walter, and others inspired the foundation in 1998 of Scholars at Risk, an international network of institutions and individuals whose mission it is to protect scholars and promote academic freedom. Harvard University is one of the members that provides sanctuary. And in my role at Houghton Library, I've been privileged to partner with colleagues on the programme to host Scholars at Risk. So learning of the roots of this organisation and the work that Belle and others were doing in the 30s and 40s inspired me to reconnect with one of the former fellows, Binalakshmi Nepram, an Indigenous scholar from Manipur in northern India, who's an award-winning women's rights and disarmament activist.
It's been 5 years I have not been home because I am living in exile in this country. I did not come to America because I wanted an American environment. Because of our work in Manipur, we were threatened and I had to come out for a while. I miss my parents, therefore, and I would like to dedicate today's lecture to them as well as to friends.
That was Bina delivering the George Parker Winship Lecture at Houghton in 2022, and she was talking about documenting Indigenous nations, war and peace in her homeland, Manipur. Welcome, Bina, to Boss Like Belle.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for inviting me to this beautiful, meaningful show. My name is Bina Nepram, and I come from the state of Manipur, which means land of jewels in northeast of India, bordering Burma. What I fight for is to build a world where we can have sustainable peace for each and every human being in this planet. It's a tall order, but I have committed my life around this work.
What got you into that work, that purpose in life? Where does that come from, Bina?
I wanted to be a physicist. That was my dream as a young girl. But I grew up in a place which is currently a war zone. Manipur, one of the most beautiful former Asiatic nation states, which joined the Union of India in 1949. India handled my home state, my indigenous homeland, by imposing martial law. And till now, we have very, very, very strong and very sad violence going there. My 14-year-old niece died in this conflict, and my parents were nearly shot. So when I saw so much violence happening to loved ones around me, and also to people whom, even if I didn't know or related, but they were my fellow people, when I saw young 14, 15, 16-year-olds disappeared, 20,000 women widowed, so many young men who lost lives in extrajudicial executions, then I realized that if we do not take care of ourselves and our land and our people as they lay dying and dead, who else is going to speak up for them? So I became their voice, and I wanted to let the world understand, and also India understand, they cannot do this to us, neither can we do it to ourselves with each other. And as a result, I became, before I realized, a peacemaker. I became somebody who nonviolence and peace is at the heart and soul of what I do, and a peace activist.
I'm sorry for the loss of your niece. That's really sad. For the sake of my listeners who may not be familiar with the history of Manipur and its relationship to India and the British, do you think that you could summarize that for us?
Absolutely. Manipur is a former Asiatic nation state with a 2,000-year-old recorded history. We have our own script, we have our constitution dating back to the 12th century, and it was like like Nepal, Bhutan, Philippines, Thailand. It was a beautiful Asiatic nation state. But then colonial rule entered Manipur in 1891 when the British came, and we had the Anglo-Manipur War of 1891. So after that, Manipur became a part of what is called British India in 1891. In fact, the last so-called Indian kingdom to be annexed to the Indian Empire was Manipur. Britain left India in 1947. So after British left, then it was incumbent on the 500 different princely states to either join the Union of India or to be on their own. Right? So Manipur wanted to return back to its pre-status, and so we had a modern constitution written in 1947 called the Manipur Constitution Act, and then for 2 years we were independent after Britain left, and then India coveted Manipur, and so the government of India then said Manipur cannot leave, so they got our king to sign the merger agreement under duress. In 1958, government of India imposed martial law called the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in the northeast of India. And that's how they started controlling the different territories. And Manipur became one of those territories. It was like forced marriage. Okay, you like us so much that you force us into a marriage, then treat us well. Some young people went off underground and started a movement for ensuring that Manipur get its self-determination. We don't want violence. We believe in coexistence. We can all coexist together, small nations, big nations. But how we do that is very, very important. So if today you are hearing Manipur and northeast of India as one of Asia's longest running conflicts, now you know one of the reasons why. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that history. Could you share how you came to be a fellow of the Scholars at Risk program at Harvard in 2021-2022?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. For me, I have been working with an entire team of the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network, working with survivors of violence, which was ongoing. So my work was centered around villages, big with communities. For instance, we help women open bank accounts. We give looms because a lot of weaving happens there, particularly to the widows, 20,000 widows. But then as we did our work, we became known for our work. In 2011, we were given CNN-IBN's Real Heroes Award. Now, that also got us into limelight, which means people started coming to our office, both in Manipur and New Delhi, where we had an office, asking for justice, for help and support. So in 2011, I think a young man was shot dead by a very noted politician's son. And nobody could take this person to court because the father and the family is very powerful. So they came to our organization. And all we did was to connect this mother whose 19-year-old only son was shot dead by a politician's son with the lawyer. And as a result, the politician family tried to hurt the mother and also tried to hurt us. So as a result, I had leave my home environment for my protection. That's how I landed up and outside the country. So I came as a Scholar at Risk fellow at Harvard because I was not only as a community, peacemaker, but I also am an indigenous scholar by training. I'm an indigenous poet and I've written books in my life. So I think it was this scholarship, with activism, which really made Scholar at Risk understand the value of my work. And I'm so grateful that they realized that because, we were just working off our backs. We didn't think of whether I'm a scholar or an activist. We did what we had to do. We had to write. We had to sometimes take bodies from mortuary and send them to the families. So this brought me in touch with Scholar at Risk, and I'm so glad I was able to come at Harvard and to be able to spend time. I'm so happy I met you, Anne-Marie. I really thank you, Houghton Library and Harvard Library, and I could live my life in libraries.
Thank you. Thank you. So when you and I met in 2021, when you were a fellow at Harvard, I remember you shared that you hadn't been back to your home in about 5 years and that you really missed your parents. Are you still in exile?
Yes, I am still in exile, but my father just turned 93 and he was very weak. And I knew that I would regret in my life if I do not see him. So this year, actually, Anne-Marie, I took a very, very bold decision, come what may, and I did go and see him. And I came back safe this year after 7 years.
That must have been really scary. Can you share a little about that?
It was very scary. I didn't know what would happen to me, but the love of parents. So even the fear didn't stop me from the love of my parents, that I could at least spend some time with them.
That must have been such an emotional reunion together.
Absolutely. 7 years for children not to see parents is a long time. And yeah, some of us had to endure that. But my parents always understood and support whatever we do. In those 7 years, I never felt they were far away from me. I had their blessings from far. I was able to transcend that fear for the love of them, and I will always hold that to my heart.
Can you talk more about your experience at Harvard, about how you interacted with the libraries? Could you say a bit about what you did with the libraries, and then we can talk a little bit more about your excellent lecture at Houghton?
Oh my God, being at Harvard was like a dream come true. And when I first arrived, I was at the Carr Center for Human Rights. So some of the things I did was, number one, I helped Toza Library look at their archives which have not been documented, but archives which have been there. I try to process Asian archives and help them define which part of Asia and what kind of work that was out there. So that's the work I did for them. I wanted to document indigenous nations because Manipur nation, where I come from, is one such nation, which the history of India and the world doesn't record, you see. So I started documenting to see through those archives if there was anything from Manipur or northeast of India or Asia. I worked with some other of your librarians, and they pulled out for me all maps of Manipur. For instance, Manipur was a site of the World War II battles between the Allies and the Axis. So Houghton had some collections from them. So I really treasure some of the rare archival material. And in some of the labelings were even wrong, so I also helped them identify to rectify those. And then after that, I was affiliated with Asia Center, and I'm still affiliated. We wanted to document Manipur's ancient manuscripts called Puyas.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you more about the lecture that you gave, and you talked about puyas, and if you could say a little bit about what puyas are and what happened to some of them. And I remember you also explained that your family had helped play a role in saving some as well.
Absolutely. This is one fascinating thing about hidden nations and hidden conflicts. And Manipur has ancient manuscripts called Puyas. There are over 4,000 in number. They are historical records, not just about documenting everyday lives, but it also contains treatises on how to garden, on agriculture, treatises on climate. My maternal grandfather explained to me how in the 17th century, when Hindu faith was introduced to Manipur, several of these puyas, which contained indigenous forms of worship and ways of life and living, they were burned in a public burial called Puya Maithaba, a historical, tragic part of Manipuri history. But many Manipuri people hid those puyas. And now we are able to retrieve them back and to be able, Manipur archives is very, very wanting. So I wanted to, and I was exploring options whether we could get even the digital copies of the puya and keep it in Houghton or at libraries who would keep them safely.
As part of your fellowship, you gave an excellent lecture on Manipur, the George Parker Winship Lecture. And if you could say a little bit more about what that experience meant to you and also to people back home, that would be great.
Yes, Anne-Marie, when I received the invite to deliver the lecture, I had tears in my eyes. It was because the first time in Harvard's history that a talk on Manipur was ever held. So it was an honor, and I didn't take that honor personally. That honor also passed down to my people in Manipur, 3.3 million Manipuris. So they watched the lecture series, and I think some of the television networks also carried it. So it was a big deal for the people of Manipur, and they really, really appreciated that. For me, entering that hall, of Houghton, where the lecture series is held, and it evoked history, it evoked, care, it evoked knowledge, it evoked connection between different worlds. And so it was a very, very spiritual, sacred moment for me to be there and to be able to share a few words. I remember honoring my grandfather for the first time there, because it was him who instilled a sense of knowledge. I was able to honor my grandfather too by putting a picture of his for the first time in any of my public lectures. If you wouldn't have invited me, if you hadn't understood, however far Manipur was, the value of this new knowledge that has not been there in libraries of Harvard, in history textbooks of our countries. So thank you. It was for us a deep honor, a sacred space for us. It was not just a lecture. And thank you to you, Anne-Marie, and to Tozer, to Houghton Library, and every one of you for making this possible.
At the time, I didn't realize the significance of it. And it was only afterwards that it really sunk in. And I'm so, so humbled to have been able to participate in it, because really, the university provided you with a safe haven, but you provided us with so much knowledge. And you were so generous with your knowledge. You were great at making connections that we didn't even see that we had amongst our different libraries as well as in our different holdings. So we got as much from the experience as you did as well. And it was truly a wonderful cultural exchange. I would love to wrap up by connecting the dots between the present, us two in the present, and Belle de Costa Green in the past. So George Parker Winship and Belle de Costa Green were friends. And while she was the director of the J. Pierpont Morgan Library and he was the librarian at Widener, which you also used when you were here on campus, they were very close, actually, and I found some really lovely banter between them in some letters because they were friends for decades. So I think it's really fun to make that connection here. And I'm just curious, you hadn't heard of Belle de Costa Green before I shared with you some information about her. What impression did you get? What was your first impression of her?
Yes. Oh my God. When I heard about Belle Costa Green from you and went through her work, what she did for scholars who were fleeing prosecution. She wrote letters for them. She ensured that they were supported, that they found places where they could sustain themselves. That really, literally, again, brought tears to my eyes. What she did transcended time and space. What she did then has been done to me now by people with spirit like hers. She, for me, embodies knowledge, not only knowledge, but knowledge which she ensured that it is used for the goodness of humanity. I think this is the Belle Costa spirit is what needs to be inculcated in every human. I think we have lost it. We have lost it. But reading about her, what she did, and the work that continues today, with Scholar at Risk and other programs which are continuing to help, because currently we have 107 global conflicts and 120 million are currently displaced. Life-sparking moments, which at that time, as we said, we may not realize it, but that spark would have put warmth to 1 million homes. When you invited me to speak, you were asking 3.3 Manipuris, you were giving them an opportunity to tell their story. I was just a medium. please consider me your ally and a volunteer. I would love to join and be the Bella Di Costa Green's voice and your own life's example, being how many Black women are librarians. We have to take care of communities who have been left on the margins of society. We have to bring and knowledge is light, and we have to follow that light. And to get more people who have not been able to get opportunity, we have to get them in. If I meet Belle today, I would I know that my heart already, even meeting now, fills my heart with so much of warmth and light that I would thank her for her courage, for her vision, and for her love for a community that she was transcending communities, nations to support. And I would tell her, Belle, you have done your bit. We will continue to do what you have done. You are a trailblazer, and we will continue because you started the trail, and we will continue this path.
That's absolutely beautiful. Bina, thank you so much for joining me. It means the world to me that we've been able to reconnect in this way, and I'm so happy to hear that you've been able to see your father. I know how much of a strain that was on you, and it just fills me with so much joy to know that you were able to celebrate his 93rd birthday with him. That's incredible. And, I hope you'll be celebrating his 100th birthday with him as well.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for all the work you're doing, and continue to be that light too.
What strikes me most about Bina's story is how it touches on the profound responsibility that institutions and leaders have in protecting vulnerable voices and taking a moral stance. When Bina described Belle's work supporting refugee scholars, she said it transcended time and space, and this really resonates with what research tells us about moral leadership. Leadership scholars Sean Hanna and Bruce Avolio studied something called moral potency. And they talk about 3 critical elements that make ethical leadership work. One is moral ownership, literally taking responsibility to address ethical challenges. The next is moral efficacy, confidence in one's ability to act ethically and achieve positive outcomes. And the third is moral courage, persisting in ethical action despite personal and professional risks. And Belle exemplified all 3. She took responsibility for protecting the scholars, she built effective support systems, and she showed courage in the face of what could have been intense pushback.
Hearing you say that actually makes me think about how she might have felt actually in the moment at the time and what the inherent risks could have been to her to do the work that she was doing. And it also makes me think about where I am on the scale as a leader between ownership, efficacy, and courage.
Yeah. It's amazing to watch institutions like Harvard and leaders at Harvard use their influence to amplify marginalized voices. Belle took these actions during World War II to create systems that would later support scholars like Bina. And what institutions are doing today is going to preserve and amplify histories and experiences in ways we can't even imagine. It is about creating structures, not just addressing crises, to transcend time and place. So what did you learn about using institutional power from Belle's example of supporting refugee scholars?
So she taught me the remarkable impact of utilizing institutional power for advocacy. And to be honest, I'm still working on applying this lesson in my own role and seeking ways to open doors and create opportunities, while still figuring out the best way to do this strategically and effectively, which comes to your point about efficacy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, efficacy, what they're basically saying in their research is you take those small steps to get to the bigger steps, right? So the small choices that you make around what's moral and ethical kind of carries you to make these bigger, more riskier decisions, because it gives you the comfort and knowledge to be empowered to do that.
So Belle demonstrated that taking calculated risks is vital in making meaningful change. And her willingness back then to kind of challenge established norms, not only in the work that she was doing in the 30s and 40s, but just in her whole career, just generally, and pushing back against societal constraints has really inspired me to just be bolder in advocating for others, even when it might lead to discomfort or backlash, to be quite honest.
Yeah, can you give us an example of something that you feel comfortable talking about where you see the ripple effects of Belle in your work?
I feel very strongly, passionately about ethical stewardship in institutions such as libraries and museums. And by that, what I mean is our moral duties to how we care for the collections that are in our possession, especially those that have come to be at various institutions through quite terrible histories, right?
Yeah.
And what is our duty of care now with the ethics and moral standards of today? That's something I feel really passionately about and that I've been advocating for at Harvard, where I work now. And I feel that that's something that earlier on in my career, I already had a sense and feeling about, but didn't feel comfortable speaking up about. But now I do ask the hard questions or make the observations about how we can do things better.
Interesting. Yeah, you've already embodied these values and you're clearly bossing like Belle in so many ways already. How do you balance institutional constraints with bold action for change? You work in a huge institution.
Balancing constraints and bold action involves this kind of sweet spot between strategic planning and coalition building. And I think particularly where I work, when I first arrived at Harvard, people said to me, success here is based on building a network, connections and collaboration, etc. And I think that that's absolutely correct. I think also understanding the limits of what can be done within an institution. And that's why often it's great to collaborate with people outside of an institution who are in a position more to push those boundaries or just operating in a completely different sphere than you are. But yeah, it's about garnering support from allies, knowing when to be an ally instead, and just aligning initiatives with broader institutional goals.
So Anne-Marie, how do you think about risk differently after studying Belle's choices?
Well, now I think about risk as being kind of like integral to what it means to be a leader and just necessary for affecting change. And the choices that she made, they've kind of taught me that measured risk when aligned with like ethical principles can really truly lead to groundbreaking advancements and just kind of totally shift the status quo. And I think that now, like her, now I'm like more established in my career, more supported, and I just feel like more empowered to be able to dare to take risks, and more so than any other time. And yeah, so that's how I'm thinking about risk right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating, even since we started this project, just to see how comfortable you've gotten with risk as you follow Belle's example and try to boss like Belle. You're really doing it. It's quite remarkable to see it in action. And the piece that really struck me about this episode and these conversations in light of the political climate that we're facing now, and recognizing that we may not see at a governmental level the kind of attention to human rights and social impact that we might want to, and it's going to be incumbent on leaders to decide how they want to play a role, just like Belle did and just like you have. Belle could have continued working in her professional domain and not looked outside and not thought about issues that were impacting folks. I'm hoping that your stories, yours and Belle's, and for folks who listen to this, that it inspires some thought around what is our role as leaders in the world in terms of contributing to the greater good. So thank you for raising those questions for us and giving us such good models to follow.
Olive complexion.
That's all for this episode of Boss Like Belle. Next time, we'll be exploring how Belle founded a club for women bibliophiles as an alternative to the men-only Grolier Club, and inspired me to seek out community with Black women library directors, we'll be joined by Patrina Jackson and Rhonda Evans, leaders of the libraries at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute and the New York Botanical Garden.
And I really would like to know, what does she think of all of this? What does she think about being outed? Does she think she's a Black librarian? Is she resentful of her being on a grand stage, not just being on a grand stage as Belle DaCosta Green, but as, the Black librarian, as Belle Greener? That's what I would want to know. What does she think of all of this?
I think that it's a great question. One of the things that she collected at the end of her career was a letter by Frederick Douglass talking about, equality and those type of things. And I thought that was really interesting that that was something that she brought into the library at that stage of her career. And I was wondering, what would her career have been like if she did not have the fear, the violent consequences of racism, all the elements in society that made it a choice for her to actually say, I choose to pass in this country. If those kind of barriers weren't there, what kind of librarian would she be like if you put her in the 21st century?
America, the second woman and the first person of color, Miss Belle DaCosta Green, unlike any other.
The Boss Like Belle podcast is created by Anne-Marie Eze, hosted by Anne-Marie Eze and Rachel Lowell-Ellison, produced by Anne-Marie Eze and Diego Señor, executive producer at Les Central Podcasts, edited by Nicole Pizarro at Les Central Podcasts, sound engineers Clayton Scoble and Brian Leach at Harvard Library, special consultants Philip Palmer and Erica Chalela, co-curators of the exhibition Belle DaCosta Green, A Librarian's Legacy, the Morgan Library and Museum. Belle's voice is performed by Erica Chalela from the Morgan Library and Museum. The Ballad of Belle DaCosta Green, composed and performed by Big Piff and under license from Big Piff. All other songs are from Pixabay.com platform. Hopeful Piano by Mac by Joseph Koff. Jahot Binalakshmi Nepram, Parker Winch. Piece. Cover art by Scott Murray, based on a photograph of Belle DaCosta Green by Clarence H. White, 1911, courtesy of the Biblioteca Berenson I Tatti, the Harvard University Center for the Italian Renaissance Studies. The Boss Like Belle podcast is also supported by the Morgan Library and Museum and made possible by the generous support of Harvard Library, whose commitment to fostering knowledge and research enables the sharing of ideas and scholarship with the broader community.